Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished House of the Dragon, second of his name, and I am more shocked at this than anybody else viewing. More shocked at it that I enjoyed it. I thought this was a good episode. The previous two I thought were meh, passable, mediocre at best, but this one I might call actually just plain good. And I came into the show with a heavy bias because of Game of Thrones season 8. I really expected to dislike this show heavily and come out of it thinking it was mediocre at the very, very best, but expecting to hate it. And I can change my mind, and this definitely changed my mind so far. I definitely won't go to the level of recommending the show until the whole season's out. And if it is an anthology, I'll recommend this season, but I don't even know if I can recommend the whole show until it's all done after the debacle that was Game of Thrones season 8. I can't recommend Game of Thrones as a whole anymore because of that. But this episode, I can recommend this episode in singularity. It was actually really entertaining, really well done, and finally got me invested in a lot of the other supporting characters that I had zero interest in previous to this one, and then of course developed the ones that I already had a certain interest in. Overall, it was just incredibly well written, surprisingly so. The dialogue was on point. It felt completely natural within the world and thought-provoking, and there was a lot of show don't tell, just all the basic stuff that is surprising to see that Hollywood gets right. It gets it so wrong these last few years that just seeing the basics done right is a breath of fresh air. And some of this praise might be due to my recent watching of Rings of Power, which I thought was abysmal in every way, shape, or form. So there might be some undue praise leveled at this episode because of how bad I believed Rings of Power was. So I will try to take that into account with my final estimation. But I think irregardless of that, there's a lot of good in this episode to like. And I will be getting into brief spoilers, very minor spoilers, so spoiler alert. And just right off the bat, I really like the intro fight sequence that began the war with the crab feeder. A little bit of good action, some interesting stuff with the dragon. It was short to the point, but it was engaging. I was immediately invested in the episode and the war with the crab feeder. I didn't like, this episode was just dark in general, nowhere near the Long Night dark, but Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon is just generally shot too dark, at least at the last few seasons of Game of Thrones and this so far. There was just, sometimes it was difficult to see what was going on. Overall, not a big deal. And another negative with the crab feeder, I really don't like his helmet or his mask. I really don't know what it is about all the helmets and the masks in the show, but none of them have been very good, which is opposed to all the great armor and costumes that have been really fantastic throughout the show. I don't know if it's a different department who's making all the helmets and the masks, but they're just not really good. It's a very minor thing, very much in the realm of nitpicking. It's just surprising to see that consistency throughout all the helmets and masks, and the crab feeder's look is really not that interesting. And I do have some concerns with the crab feeder that I will get to a little bit later. But just again, talking about the dialogue, there were so many moments where I thought, wow, that is a great line. That is a great scene. And the way it interacted with the characters, with Viserys especially, he had some of the most phenomenal dialogue of this show to date. And especially when it came to his interactions with his daughter, and I was just really impressed by it, how concise he was saying, and none of it came down to really sexism for him, which is something that I was very concerned that this show would dip too heavily into. But he was just like, hey, we have the same responsibilities as royals. As royals, we're expected to get married, and it sucks. I didn't like it when it happened to me both times, but it's something that we got to do. It was just some really great interactions, and you could still see he loved his daughter through it all. He's a genuinely good person. In the first two episodes, I really didn't connect with him all that much. I thought he was extremely weak, but he showed a strong degree of character resolution and a backbone in this episode that he hasn't shown to date, that really invested me in his character. And I really think he's actually a better ruler than people give him credit for. And he makes more informed decisions and thinks through things more than people would think. And his obsession with mythology and symbolism adds an interesting degree to his character when he was talking about his dream sequences from back when Rhaenyra was born, and the whole thing with the white stag, whether or not that should mean that his son should be the new heir versus Rhaenyra. Overall, just some really fantastic stuff with Viserys, some great conversations with Rhaenyra and Alicent. I'm really getting invested in Alicent. I really like her chemistry with everyone. It's some really impressive stuff, and I just really like how she interacts with all the other characters, and her conversation at the bonfire with Viserys was a scene that particularly stood out to me, and just the king deciding whether or not he was going to keep Rhaenyra as heir. That was actually probably my favorite scene of the episode, and it really got me involved in everything, invested in everything, and that's something that I hadn't had today. I was okay with watching the previous two episodes, but I wasn't truly invested in anything that was going on, and I didn't really care how it all turned out plot-wise. But after that bonfire scene, I was invested in them, their characters, and everything that was going on. So I really enjoyed that scene. And another sequence that I really enjoyed, Cole and Rhaenyra actually has some really good chemistry. In the previous two episodes, they had limited interactions. It was more from a distance. You couldn't really tell if they had good chemistry. In this episode, they definitely had good chemistry, and I really like the two of them together. And apparently there's some lore deal with him being Dornish and not supposed to be Dornish. I don't know about that, but the actor does have chemistry with Rhaenyra regardless, and I really enjoyed them together. And the sequence with the boar, there's a lot of layers to that scene that, I mean, it's not nothing profound by any stretch of the imagination, but there's just more there than meets the eye, and that is something that I haven't seen from modern Hollywood in a while, so I have to call it out and praise it because of how surprising it ended up being. Moving on a little to the technical side of things, I have to praise the CGI. In the past couple episodes, my only issue with the CGI was with some of the dragons' faces. That wasn't the case in this episode. We never got a close-up, but it did have some really beautiful landscapes, some big sweeping stuff, and the characters, when they were in a big environment, it felt like they were in a big environment, and that's something that Rings of Power specifically was unable to do. It might have a wide shot, and then you're in this little tiny room set. House of the Dragon, not that issue whatsoever. I really like the wide shot of all the ships getting shot down by the crab feeder while Daemon was flying over from the wide shot before the council meeting with the sea snake and his family. Some really interesting stuff that I really enjoyed. And that leads into probably my favorite point of the episode, Daemon's run, when he makes a suicidal run towards the crab feeder, trying to draw out the forces of the feeder and act as a diversion as well. And it all goes into because his whole point of getting into this war with the crab feeder was to prove his worth to his brother and prove that he was capable of being the heir. And when he got news that his brother was sending help, that was admitting to failure in his mind. And so he had to wrap up the war before the reinforcements from the king came, and so the suicide mission posed by the sea snake's son became the only opportunity to really try to end it before those reinforcements came. And so I really understood what he was going for, understood his motivation and why he was willing to do the suicide run. Daemon's run was just really fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Daemon was in this episode far too little, just like the previous one, but I just love him when he's on the screen. He's just electric. Matt Smith is one of my favorite actors. Really the only reason I checked out the show, and he's proving that I was right to do so. And he's just a really good character that's really thought out, even with his limited screen time in the last two episodes. I really love him. And getting to one of my last criticisms of this episode, I didn't like how it cut out the battle with the crab feeder when Daemon actually defeated him. Similar to the Moonlight situation, I feel like that was something that they've been building up towards for all three of these episodes, this defeating of the crab feeder, and it happens off screen. I don't really appreciate that. The shot with Daemon carrying him out covered in blood was an awesome shot, and I love that shot. I think it would have benefited from a fight sequence, maybe in those tunnels where it's really claustrophobic and he has to fight the crab feeder like knife to knife. A knife fight would definitely lean towards the crab feeder being victorious versus a sword fight, which Daemon would obviously be superior, and have a really claustrophobic battle in the tunnels. I think that would have enhanced it, and they've been building up to this conflict for all three episodes. Just to cut it out, I was very underwhelmed by that. Didn't really appreciate that, but the shot of him coming out covered in blood was enough that I was able to forgive it ultimately. And even the post-episode, behind the scenes stuff didn't take away my enjoyment of this episode. They didn't say anything astronomically dumb like they did after the previous two episodes. They didn't get political, and I really appreciated that. And this episode really didn't get political at all. Everything felt natural and organic in the world, and the story and the characters were all compelling enough and well written enough that everything made sense. Nothing felt forced or pandering or trying to be educational in any way, shape, or form. And the big thing with this episode is it made me care about Rhaenyra. She really came across as one note and uninteresting to me in the first two episodes, but now I'm really starting to connect with her. She was the primary one that I felt a distinct change in my investment in her character in this one. I don't know if that'll change in around episode 5 or 6 when there's the massive time jump, but I'm actually really looking forward to episode 4 because of this. And the trailer for episode 4 that came at the end of it showed a lot of interesting stuff, and it looks like it's going to be very action heavy and exciting. So I really like this episode, and I'm looking to the next one. And I think I can finally call at least this episode good, and maybe so far the series good. Still won't recommend it till it's all out after season 8, but it's good so far, and I can't believe I'm giving it that high of a praise. That might not sound that high to you guys, but I'm usually a lot more strict with my numberings than the majority of people. But I thought this was good. I think I might give this all the way up to a 6.5 out of 10, and that's a lot higher than I thought I would be giving anything in House of the Dragon's totality. So overall, those are my thoughts, and I am just really happy with House of the Dragon so far. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.